Hi there, I'm Punky Tolson. Welcome to the Life on Life podcast. You're listening to episode number 86, Doing Life in Your Living Room. Hi guys, and welcome back to Life on Life. I am here today with two of my very favorite people and dear friends, Michelle Schrader.
Hello.
Michelle, you've heard me mention so many times. Michelle and I work in ministry and women's ministry together, and she is the one that really makes all the Life on Life stuff happen. And this is one of our newest, well, she's been with us a year now, but in the ministry, this is Alicia Kentz. And Alicia is also working with us in ministry and does just a ton of our marketing stuff, makes John's podcasts happen, all of his social media, and also works on the Gathering of Men team. So I'm thrilled to have them with me today. This is kind of fun because we've never done like a little group gathering and interview. But what we're going to talk about today is your living room and our living rooms and just how much life happens in a living room. This was something that's been percolating in my heart for a while after a conversation I had with some friends. But then yesterday, Jenny Allen, who we all love so very much, posted something just as I was about to open my door and welcome a dozen girls that I meet with on Wednesday night into my home and into my living room, my tiny living room where we all cram into. But Jenny posted this yesterday and I just loved it. She said, I started IF gathering. I wrote books. I built Bible studies, all because I believed in what God did in my living room for 15 years. For 15 years, I led group after group of women. We cried together, prayed, and imagined better futures for each other and simply studied our Bibles. It's where my life changed, and it's where many lives changed right in front of me. I fear we have forgotten the power of the living room. So that's what we want to talk about today. That's what we want to share with you guys. Most of you out there have a living room. I have a living room. You have a living room. You have a living room. How are we using our living rooms? When I was growing up, in our house, we had a living room and we had a family room. And the difference was, and this was in Florida, so I think most people are like this, is the living room was a special place that was pretty much off limits to the family. Thus, the family room was where we gathered and watched TV and all of that. It was kind of connected to the kitchen, but the living room was always the most well-appointed room in the house. That's where Mother had the nicest furniture, the nicest furnishings, and it was off limits to everyone, including the dog, could not even walk through the living room and until we had like special guests over. So it just makes me wonder, like, the living room. If we're not actually doing some living room and some life on life in the living room, then what's the purpose of the living room? I think there's a big purpose. And I think about just me and my faith and how it's been impacted over the years in somebody's living room. I've talked to women who have encouraged me and discipled me in living rooms, cried a lot of tears in living rooms. But I think the point that I want to make today is how are we using our living rooms? Because we've all got one or some place that we could open up our front door and welcome friends in to open our Bibles, gather around the person of Jesus, learn about God, and learn to know Jesus, love Jesus, and follow Jesus together, and really develop deep relationship with one another, but deep relationship with Jesus. So what are y'all's thoughts on that?
Yeah, I saw the same post from Jenny Allen, who, like Punky said, we love so much, and that was I think about all the wonderful conversations I've had with women, with mentors, with friends, with those who discipled me, that have taken place in our home. You know, maybe it wasn't the living room, maybe it was the kitchen table, maybe it was the floor of my son's room while they're playing, but it happens in there, in that connection and community, without a camera in front of us or a mic in front of us, without a platform to stand on. It just happens behind the door, behind the scenes, and yet it's been some of the most impactful moments of my life.
And you actually reposted Jenny's post yesterday.
I did.
As did I. But tell them what you shared in that, because I thought it was so good about platforms.
Well, my heart just went out to all the young girls. You know, in this ministry, we have privy to a lot of young women who, with very good intentions and a very sweet heart, they want to be the next Jenny Allen, the next Punky Tolson, Priscilla Shire. They want their platform, and they are concerned about how to build a platform for Jesus, how to have a following for Jesus, like how to do all this thing on a pedestal. Although I don't know if they always realize that's what they're asking for, but so I reposted it with just an encouragement to them of just start with your friends, start in your home, start where you're at. God will do the rest. If he wants to elevate you and create a platform, he will do that. And if not, just do the work that he's asked you to do, no matter how many people are behind you following.
That's so good, and it's so true, because we, in this social media age, and I don't know, you've probably never experienced life without a cell phone and maybe without social media, but in this age of social media, where social media does preach to us and dictate so much, we see people who are successful in ministry, teaching the Bible, leading ministries, and it's big. And so we've got this big mentality. And when you think about Jesus and how he was with people, he had big crowds that followed him, but who did he go deep with? 12 guys. 12 guys.
Right.
He
And
went
three
deep
within
with.
them.
And
Yeah.
3 within them. And we are here, and y'all are here in your faith, because those guys got it, and they took it, and they ran with it. And that's a point, is helping people drill down deep so that it does become more than just a thing we do on Sunday or a thing we do on Wednesday night, but it becomes a way of life. That's the intent of knowing God and his word and coming to let him and trust him and follow him. And I say so often, we are never going to love and trust someone we do not know, and the only way we're going to get to know God, know Jesus Christ, is through his word. So yeah, I mean, like my husband John is always saying, more time with fewer people equals greater impact.
That's
and
right.
It's true. And so we think, well, I could never do that. I could never get a group of people in my home. Well, it just takes 1 or 2 or 3 or maybe a dozen. I, in fact, would say don't even go more than 12, because you really can't drill down deep with a massive amount of people.
Especially as girls.
Especially
as women.
Because we get to
Can
talk.
talk.
I mean, seriously. And then you get
Yeah.
off point, which going off road is great and it's needed and everything. But you meet with girls all the time, because you've got, Alicia's got a great group of roommates, and then you're involved in your church, and you've got a small group at your church. So tell us about that and the living rooms that you meet in.
Yeah. I think my favorite thing about like this whole concept with living room is just like the simplicity of it. Like it doesn't have to be this big, complicated, on a stage, everything kind of thing. It's just that simple, just like welcoming someone into your home. I have 3 roommates, so there's 4 of us in a 3-bedroom house, and it's really small, and so we have to like fit where we can. We can't really like host a lot of people that often because there's not a ton of space, but we make the most of our space. And so a lot of our conversations might be like around our little kitchen table while someone's cooking dinner, or just like seated around the floor in our living room, like that kind of thing. But also with my community group at church, we were meeting at church, and it was good, like some depth to it. Part of it is just like as we were getting to know each other too. But we recently transitioned to like meeting in someone's living room at her house, and I have just seen so much more like willingness to go deep. Like I think we were talking about this morning of just like your surroundings matter. Like they create a different like they take down the walls, like those barriers for you, like even subconsciously knowing that like, oh, I don't have to worry about someone walking by this door right now. I can just cry. Or I know that I can just like walk out of here tonight and go straight to my car and go home and not have to worry about like small talk with someone as I have a swollen red face or something, you know?
Yeah.
And so just kind of like removing all of those barriers, I feel like makes a really big difference with actually getting deep. Like one, you have to spend time with Jesus in order to know Jesus, but like you also have to create that like time and depth with people in order to like actually be known. And so And
For
that can't
sure.
really happen in public, like even in a public
Mhm.
place, like in a coffee shop. Like they're great, but personally, I don't really want to cry in a coffee shop.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
And so I want to like remove that as a barrier if I can.
I
And
think,
living
yeah,
room's a
I
great
mean, that's
place.
such a great point because the surroundings do make a difference.
Mhm.
And there's just something about somebody opening up their front door to you and
Mhm.
inviting you in right there. It's just this feeling of,
Yeah.
I'm not like in front or I have to perform or put on a happy
Yeah.
face or anything like that. But
It's
also,
vulnerable too.
Yes.
Like to be the one hosting. Like there is a level of like
Yeah.
ooh, exposed in a
Right.
good way though.
yeah.
Yeah.
And sometimes if you're doing the hosting, it doesn't necessarily mean you're doing the leading. You
Right.
can be the
Mhm.
hosting and opening up your home. And you said something about making the most of the space that you have or making most. And I think that's a good question that we can ask ourselves and ask one another out there is how are you making the most of the space that you have in your home? We live in a community where there are a lot of big homes with, I'm sure, big living rooms, big spaces. And how are we using that space? If truly God, everything we have is from God, it's a gift from God. How are we using what He's given us and gifted us
Right.
for
Stewarding
maximum impact for Him, right?
Mhm.
So we've been friends for a while, a long time, and we've been together through some Bible studies that have met in places and then met in homes too. And when I first started teaching back in my home church in Orlando, I met in the parlor, which was like a little living room in our church, and it was tiny. And then when I moved here to Dallas, we at first met in a room that was in the basement of a church here in this area. And after a while, I know somebody had offered up their home. So we met in my friend Carol's living room, and she'd bring in chairs and we'd all squish in there. And to your point, it changed the dynamic of the group. It was just so much more personal, and people were also more willing to invite friends. And then from there, we went to our friend Jan's house, who literally had someone move furniture aside and push things aside and put chairs in there so that all of us could pile in there. Then my friend Lori opened up her home. And it's just the graciousness of people who said, I've got a house, I've got a living room, I've got the space. You come, you lead us, and that's what we'll do. And definitely that makes a difference. Just being invited into someone's atmosphere like that is just a different feel, and I think is a great, perfect, fertile place for a lot of deep life on life to happen as we gather around Jesus and His Word. So, what are some memorable moments that you've had as just in terms of studying the Scripture in someone's home? How has that impacted you? Where have you had a big encounter with Christ in those times where you've had aha moments that have really changed you or redirected you, or you feel like you learned more, grew more in those settings?
I'm going to answer your question, but I wanted to go back to something else that you said. When you were talking about, all that sweet Jan did to open up her home, she had a huge living room and there was lots of furniture, but we also had, what, 80 women coming to that at that point? We
did, yeah.
It was
large.
A massive amount of women. It took a massive amount of effort to undo her living room, to prep it and then put it back. And I think that is such a key thing to, like you said, you don't always have to lead it. You can just host it. And as the body works together, right? The body of Christ, as each of us play our role, you might be the person who's willing to host it. You might be the person who's willing to help the one who's hosting. I'll move the chairs. I'll move the furniture. I'll put it all back together afterwards. Or, and you might be the one who shows up to lead the lesson, which it's too much for one person to do all the time. But when everybody works together and is okay with their role and celebrates and does their role to the best of their God-given ability, it's a beautiful thing. You might like, again, that was a huge study. That was not a normal thing. You might only have 8 women in your room, but still, if somebody else says, you know what, I'm going to show up early and help you prep whatever. If you'll open your door, I'll help put your space back together once the 8 women leave. Like, look for what you can do. Look for how you can be part of that. Even if you're not the host, even if you're not the leader, look for a way to help out. It's huge, especially for the leader. Y'all, there's so much that goes into putting together a Bible study and leading a Bible study, that the more that you can do to step up and say, instead of saying, let me know how I can help, but to look around and go, I'll do that, that is huge. So I just wanted to
That's such a
share
good
that point.
and important point, because even Jesus had a group of people, women, that followed and served and did a lot in terms of the ministry. So I think you do what you can where you can, and definitely step up. Everybody can do something, so definitely step up.
And I think it's so important too, like, to not do it all yourself. Of like, even if you're the one who's opening your home and someone else is teaching, but you don't have somebody who's like volunteered initially to like help move the furniture around, like, having people do that creates such buy-in for them of like, it's bonding. It's like, it's fun to like figure out how are we all going to fit. Like, it made me think of at my old church, we did like a training on public speaking. And the pastor was like, if you're ever feeling like your audience is not invested, have them move the room. Like, have everyone move their chair around, like pull them in closer, like something, because he was like, having them create the space creates buy-in for them to listen and learn more. And I'm like, that I think is able to happen in a living room. Like, you're able to have that flexibility to like plan for it, of we have to do this together, which I think is so fun.
Yeah, that's so good. What were you saying?
Well, to go back to the question that you asked, memorable moments. One that comes to mind, the most recent time that I opened up my living room, I have a 4-year-old son. I was a new mom at the time, and I am working through the Bible recap. It's taken me 4 years to get through a 1-year plan, but whatever, I'm still on it.
Okay, that's progress, though.
Baby steps are still steps.
Right.
Absolutely.
I remember at one point I was working my way through the Old Testament, and I'm like, okay, I want to kind of skip to the end. I want to see the overall picture. And so I decided to do Angie Smith's 6-week study of Seamless, which is an overview of the Bible. And I thought, I will do this so that my brain can rest and go like, okay, I know it's coming. Now let me go back to the day-to-day. So anyway, I decided to open it up. I put it up. My neighborhood has a Facebook group. I put it out there and was like, I'm going to do this study in my home, if anyone would like to join me. Well, I had 4 ladies show up. They were all probably 20 to 30 years older than me. And I think they were a little surprised when I opened my door and they saw me. But we had the sweetest time together. And what was so neat was, among these ladies, I had one who has been through every, like a BSF type of study, has been through all of them. One who came from a Catholic faith and just kind of was curious about this Bible. And then another who was just a born and bred believer. So the viewpoints that everybody brought in, and watching the light bulbs go off, even for these ladies who have lived much longer than I have and been in the Word much longer, some of them, than I have, but see them connect the dots. I mean, that was just fabulous. And then as a new mom, I got to hear from all of them and their experiences. And even though it may not have been, Bible study related, just the encouragement I got from them of this hard stage of babies and toddlers. It was a beautiful thing. Yeah.
And so courageous of you, I would say, to do at that season of your life, when a lot of women are like, I don't have time to do any of that.
But it didn't feel curious. Thank you for saying that. It didn't feel that way. What it felt like was, I need accountability. Like, I need somebody showing up at my house, going to ask me, did you do this week's lesson? Because that's what it took at that point to get me to do it. So
okay, I love that, because that is really so important for us to remember, is sometimes we got to do the hard thing and get the accountability so that we will stick to it. We were talking about that in our group last night, just like, how can we hold one another accountable to even just get up 5 minutes earlier to get in God's Word. So, but God bless you for doing that. I mean, it was a win-win.
It's
all
great.
the way around.
I loved it. Yeah.
That's great. Okay, what about you?
Two memories like come to mind for me. One, it wasn't a like Bible study oriented as much, but it was on Easter this past year. My family is in California, and so this was my first Easter like away from family. Like with school, I couldn't end up making it back. And so my roommates and I, we all are doing different things, but we all like invited our own people into our home. So there was like, I think 15 women in our house, like again, very small, like there were people everywhere. But it was so cool because they were from all different like walks of life, of experiences, of different like religious backgrounds and everything. And so we like made like we did not hide at all the fact that we're celebrating like because we're Christians, like Easter is an important day. But just being able to like have like everyone brought food and like there were so many of us sitting on the floor and like even just that like humility with it of like I am hearing about your experience of what Easters have looked like for you in India and like how that's maybe not something, but like what has that looked like in your religion, like what just exploring that. And I'm like literally at your feet. And I just had this moment like, wow, while she was talking of like, this was what Jesus did. Like he washed the disciples' feet. And like, even though I wasn't washing her feet, it did kind of feel like that same like humility of like, am I doing this? Is my posture this way with everyone when I'm interacting?
Yeah.
And in my living room, it felt safe enough for me to do that. Whereas like, I might not feel that safety in other places. So that memory was brought to mind. And then also I was just thinking of like last night with my community group. At my church, we always have to answer 3 questions every Wednesday of how are you feeding your soul? How are you feeding your flesh? So like confession, and then how are you feeding others? And so I had shared with them about like a way that I cope by like avoiding hard things is, this is so silly, but like talking about a guy that I like. And so I was like talking about it in the group. And like in that moment, like a couple of the girls were like, okay, like I want to hear that, but also where did you sin? Like what was your like confession that you need to talk about? Like that's why we're here. Like yes, love that for you, but also like we need to actually talk about like going deep. And it was just this like I was like, ooh, you're right. Like I'm so glad that you know me enough to like point that out and hold me accountable to that, because it's a lot more fun to talk about this than to talk about this is where I tried to be God this week or whatever, you know?
Yeah.
So those
that's
two memories.
good. That's good.
Yeah.
I would say I've had a lot. I'm so much older than they are, but I've had a lot of memories in living rooms. One just last night, I will say, and to kind of tag on to what you were saying is there's 2 questions I had posed, and one was, where do you see Christ-likeness, the fruit of Christ-likeness, developing in your life? And I want us to notice that we're supposed to, be able to tell a tree by its fruit, right? And so they were great and honest and humble about that too. And then I said, okay, where do we see that there's itty bitty fruit or not so much fruit where we need to grow it? They were so honest and open and just uninhibited to just say, really, the hard stuff, like stuff about pride and humility and just unforgiveness and things like that. And I thought I would not have had that opportunity in a larger group Bible study. Nothing wrong with large group Bible studies, but I wouldn't have had an opportunity to address that right there with that person. That would probably have been somebody that would come up to me afterwards and say, can we get together and talk? And because I've got some struggles in that area. Right. So we wwere able to talk about it right then. And in having all of us share, including me, really helped to encourage one another. Right. And not so much to say, oh, well, I'm not so bad because look at what she's not developing, but just to say, encourage one another that, hey, I've got that same thing going on. I own that too. And I need to grow in that area or be more surrendered so that I can grow in that area. I would say some other sweet memories center around girls coming to Christ in my living room or in someone's living room. And I had one girl say to me, you can never get rid of your sofa because too many people have cried tears on that sofa and come to Jesus on that sofa. I have had it recovered, but just to see women's eyes light up with understanding of the gospel and what it means. and how that implicates their life in the most beautiful way, and then say, yes, I want that, and give their life to Jesus. That's pretty extraordinary. I have a very dear, one of my best friends in Orlando. We were having this conversation several years ago, and I said, there are so many people out there that would love to come into your home. She has a beautiful home, and sit at your feet and just learn from you. And I said, I just challenge you, and I'm going to challenge you to do this too, to stand on your front porch and say, God, this is your home. And I said, tell them your address, such and such, some avenue, and give him your home and say, invite who you want to invite into my home, into my living room, and I will love on them for Jesus. I will point them to the truth in his word. And 2 hours later, a friend knocked on her door, and she asked her, would you like to get together and do this? She said yes. And so by the end of the week, she had like 5 girls. And so I'm going to ask you guys to do that first, to thank God for what he's given you in terms of the tangible things like your home. You may rent your home. You may own your home. You may share your home with roommates. You may have a small home. But ask the Lord what he would have you do with the home he's given you, and how you might use it for your glory. And yeah, stand on your front porch and say, Lord, I'm going to open my door. I want you to send through my door. Send to me the women that you want me to encourage for you. And maybe that's simply hosting something and having someone come lead you, or it's just gathering around your scripture with Jesus and learning together. And there are plenty of great resources out there that will help you do that. My goodness, we mentioned Jenny Allen. Her resources are exhaustive in terms of what you can learn doing that in your own home and using those as guides. I've got a friend, I call her a friend. I know her from Instagram, believe it or not, just this darling woman. Her name is Jan. She lives in Georgia, and she gathers women in her kitchen. She's a cook. She is an awesome cook. And I think over the years, she's had people say to her at church, will you teach me how to make your biscuits? Will you teach me how to make this or that? And so she started gathering women together in her church, or in her kitchen from her church, and loving on these girls and teaching them. Always had a lesson prepared, from the scriptures as she was teaching them how to cook. So I thought that was a really crazy, really cool, creative way. And it's just amazing. So now I follow her, and it's just so sweet. But I would like you to think about that in the coming year, how you can use your home, your living room to do some life on life with some people who need Jesus, who need to go deeper with Jesus. So thank him for that home, open your door, and let him do the rest. Look, it's his deal. All you have to do is show up. Be prepared, show up, open the door, let the Holy Spirit do what he wants to do in and through your life, in your home, in your living room. You can see why I love these two so much. Get choked up even thinking about it. They're so precious. So let us hear from you and how that's working for you. And if you take the big, bold step and open your front door and invite some people into your living room in the coming year, I look forward to seeing what Jesus is going to do in and through your life. I love you guys. And don't you forget that you are greatly and dearly loved by the King. Bye-bye. Thanks for joining me on the podcast today and for doing life with me. Hey, tell me what's on your heart, friend. I would really love to talk about what you want to talk about. So email me at hello@punkytolson.com, or find me on Instagram too. Now that's a new email address, hello@punkytolson.com. Wherever you listen, please remember to subscribe to this podcast. It really helps us get these messages to more people. And while you're at it, please share this message with a friend. Pass it along to somebody that you do life with too. That's that for that, guys. I love y'all. Bye-bye.